Hello future tech leaders, I am Sindhuja. Based on my own experience, I know that learning the right skills can shape our future. What if I say learning was as thrilled as the tech world itself? There we go. A cloud foundation, that's exactly what you will experience. From day one, you will be immersed in the interactive sessions and expert-led courses that covers most of the widely used technologies in the zone of data science to cloud computing, which brings more light to the life of a techie. I'm so excited to help you and unlock the true potential of a technology. Well, then why to wait? Let's see what it unfolds.
Error contains two sections. One is a namespace and identifier. Namespace identifier. So namespace is 1. It tells a category, which category of error it is, database category or file or GMX, whatever. It tells about a category of error. Identifier defines the inside that category what actual error is. So in manual C, there we can handle error at 3 levels. Application level, app level, application level, flow and processor level. So this differentiation is very important for me. Application level means for multiple flows. In your Mule project, you have multiple flows. So for multiple flows, we can define one error handler. This error handler has a name. We will use some name to say it is a global error handler. The name of this error handler is a global error handler. You can give any name. So this error handler refers to the flow. If you refer, the error handler is the global this application level error handler. Flow level means for each flow has separate error handler section. If you define error handler, error handling logic in the flow specified space, that is called flow level error handler. Process level means we will grab the processor inside the try block. The try block has a dedicated error handler section. Last time you call it component level. Is it the same? Yeah, component level or processor level. So we will grab processors inside this try block, and if any error occurs, it's come to first try block. Try error handler. Got it? So one quick question. I think it's clear. You're right. You explained very well application level and flow level or process level. That's good. I understand. I think I remember how you defined the error handler in the flow level, on the component level or process level. But I forgot, how do you define the errors in application level? Sure, I'll show you right now. One moment. In a moment, I'll show you. Because when you drag the listener, that is a flow level, isn't it? The flow level, well, how do you do? How do you do in application level? We'll understand about error handler. Assume error handler is a big container, right? Yeah. Error handler is a container. Yeah, and which contains what? Which contains error handler scopes. Error handler is a container that contains error handler scopes. Inside the scope, we will define our error handling logic. What to do when an error occurs? That logic will define inside the error handler scopes. There are two types of scopes. One is on error continue. On error continue scope and on error propagates. So we won't define error handler, error handling logic directly into error handler. Right? We won't define error handling logic directly into error handler. Rather, we define the error handling logic inside the scope. The first point, remember. See, even let me, So this is error handler. This is error handler. The box I'm highlighted, right? I can't define directly over here. I can't define some logger. Are you sharing another screen? I'm only see the board. There it is. I only see the board only. We match the board. No. I'm using this board for the first time. I'll be sharing, re-sharing. So this flow, this is called error handler. The one highlighted over here. Right? But this is a flow level. So error handler. Right? But I can directly put logger over here. This is not allowed. This is only error handling section. Error handling section. But I can put logic directly over here. What it contains. What the error handler contains. It's only error handler scope, right? It's only error handler scopes. It contains error handler scopes, right? What are the scopes? There are two kinds of scopes. We'll see the difference. One is on error continue or on error propagate. We can drag this, scopes. And inside these scopes, I can define my error handler on error propagate. Okay, so I have a question. And I understand, right? You explained more about what contains error handler scope. Correct. But this flow, this right now is error handler flow, right? Flow level. And I don't know if you could maybe take us, a few seconds. What is the application one? I'm coming to that point. Alright. Here there is. You can see something over here. Error handler. Right? I can drag this error handler and put over here. Right? So this has some name. See, the name of this error handler is error handler something. Error handler concept. Error handler something. I can make this small like I can do something. I can do any name. Okay, I'm giving this name as global error handler. Right. So, can I directly put logic over here? Like when I put logger over here. Is that alright? Yeah, so what is this container? What does it contains? The same, right? Yeah, it contains error handler. Yeah, I can put scopes. Right. Scope over here. Any number of scopes. Scope over here. And okay. Now it's clear. But this is the same one as the one on the top. Yeah. But this is flow level. This error handler doesn't require a name. Or you can just put it in the name. Yeah, it's inside the flow. inside the flow. It doesn't require a name. I think they're both inside the flow, but one is. This is outside the flow. I can put one more thing, but they are okay. Alright, so that's inside the flow. This one inside the application. Inside the application. Something about this one. See, it's not inside the flow. This is an independent entity, independent error handler, where this is only for dedicated for this flow only. Got it? Okay. So this logic is for handling errors occurring in this flow only. Yeah, it won't bother errors in other parts of our application. Right. For this flow, scoped error handler. This is global error handler, application scoped error handler. We can refer this one anywhere in any flow. We can come on. Right? So I can do one thing right now. And different on both. Oh, see this. This is a click on that section, right? Yeah, the difference is asking for difference. Yeah, if I open here, I can see all global error handlers. Right now, my application contains only one global error handler. So it's showing up. If I select like this, what happened? So this guy is referring this error handler. If any error occur in this flow, the control comes over here. So there are some components that don't come with error handler. So what is the last, the one that you dragged last time? The one that was pointing to the global one. Yeah, the scheduler. Scheduler is just a footer. I can remove the scheduler. Nothing else. So scheduler has its own error handler. Yeah, scheduler has its own error handler. Even it is, scheduler has its own error handler. See, it is scheduler over here. And it is a flow actually. It is not scheduler. See, this is a flow. In the source, the scheduler is. We can't get the scheduler in the source. Oh, so the flow has an error handler section, right? If you click on the error handler section, it is asking for reference. Okay, it means, are you referring to any global error handler? That's what it is asking. If you don't want to refer to global error handler, what we do? We can expand this one and we can define error handling over in this flow. Either we need to refer the global error handler or we can define error handling logic for this flow. Locally, we can define error handling logic for that flow. Right, but right now it's empty. And so say that we have a log. Can you put a log or something under the scheduler? So if we do that, then okay, that's the component level. So this error handler, it wants us either to use a global or its own error handling. So how do they know? And so create a new nickname. If we say that, for example, if we say to you this is, there will be error, use a local error handler or its own local error handler and not global one. Although how do we define that? Okay. Now what is this flow name? Error handling concepts flow, right? So I go to this level, see? Error handling concepts flow. This is a flow start from here and from here. If you see, there is error handler defined over here. This is inside the flow. Yeah, see that the flow hands over here, right? Right, error handler is defined inside this one. So if any error occurs, this table take care. Yeah, so there is no name over here. See, there is no name. I did not give any name, right? And let me see one more difference. See, this is what is this. Error handling concepts flow 2. The name of this flow 2. But what is doing error handler reference? It's referring to global error handler. If you see the code of that flow error handling concepts, flow 2 error handler ref. Ref means referring to global reference. Yeah, right. So did you pick the global error handler? Yeah. Did you associate it to this, or it did automatically? No, I show you actually. Okay, I can do one thing. I can do this one. Initialize this like this, I associate that one. Or deassociate. I can go to here and one moment I can show you how to associate. The referencer, see the reference. See, there is no error handler on here, right? So we click on this blocks. It is asking for reference. Alright, we select that one. What happened? You will. Yeah, I'll put there. Global error handler. Reference global error, right? Like that. So if you want it, it's on global error handler. So if you want it, it's on error handler for this, like the concept of flow 2. Then what do you do? Either you do different, global or local, not both. Yeah, I know. How do you make it local? Go over here and remove that one. Remove the reference. You create a new one. No. Remove that, just remove the reference. That's it, and create a new one. Now come over here, and it is the new reference is gone. Now add your logic. Add a random scope. Then on area. On air. Continue that scope. That's it. It's become local now. It's local. Okay. So this is, I know it's very important topic, is very important. And and I'm going to, you have to really good at it, but how hard it is to learn. It's easy. Actually. So right, I don't know, for some reason, it feels like a overwhelming, like so many, because so many components and so many flows, and you have to take all the flows into the errors into account. And I don't know. Yeah, I think I understand it very well. The only thing is that, every time I create a flow, we have to, you have to take error handling into account. And then every time you have a component, you have to take error handling into account. And then we also have a global error handling. So I understand it very well. I'm thinking, I don't know. Is this like I don't know? Maybe it's a tedious word. You know a lot of. Yeah, once we start working on that. Got. We discussed about error handling. What is error handling? Error handling is a container. Container you can put in local or global. I like that. This is a box or container. Whatever it contains. Error handler scopes. Error handler is a container that contains error handler scopes. If I put this error handler box inside the flow, that becomes flow-based error handler. If I remove that box from the flow and put outside, it becomes global error handler. If I put the same box inside a tree scope, that becomes component error handler. But box and box contains the scopes. Now, what are the scopes? Why the scopes? Yeah, because I think that's the question. Each scope is defined to handle error. Each scope is defined to handle some error. So in your logic you are writing, you are defining some logic. Right? So in your logic, what you are doing is what your requirement is. We will get a request from the postman or some client. Some client will do request to us. The first activity we need to do is we need to write that request, whatever payload that is coming from the client. That payload we need to write to file. Yes. Write to file the first activity. And second activity is you need to insert a recorded database. Whatever things that come that you need to insert a database. Insert to base. And finally, if database is successfully inserted, write the confirmation to James. Okay, successfully inserted. Okay, if you have any failure in the database, you need to write failure to insert to database something that the result we need to write to GMs. Okay. Yep. That is your business requirement. Right? So now you are coding that one. First you write to file and you insert it to database. Okay, this is file component. You write into file. Afterwards your database insert. And finally Gems publish. Okay, 3 activities you are doing inside the probe. Now how many types of errors we may encounter while executing this probe? There is a chance of getting errors. How many types of how many? You know what I say. What are the chances? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. We may get the file errors. We may get database errors. We may get James errors. Okay, yeah. So to handle each kind of category, we define a box. This is error handler. Error handler is a box. There is a box. Inside this box, to handle each kind of category, we define a scope. This scope is responsible for handling file errors. And another scope is responsible for handling database errors, and another scope is responsible for handling Gems errors. It is not always like that. You can put one scope and you can handle all the errors in single scope. Also, that's also possible. Then why scope is? Scope is intended to handle error, actual error. In each scope you can configure. Hey, scope, what error are you going to handle? I can tell this. I can configure this scope to handle that kind of error. If file error occurs, control comes. So if anything error occurs in the database, control comes to the second block. If Gems error occurs, control comes to third block. So what I do is each error I can handle in a separate way. in whatever the requirement demands. Right. I got the flexibility right. That's good. But based on what you showed me, there are so many namespaces in the file and also database. There are so many different errors in each scope. That's the challenge. Yeah, I can show you right now how to handle that one, how to configure the error in the scopes. But try to understand what is the scope actually, what is error handler. Error handler is a simple box that contains scopes. First point, each scope is intended to handle some error. Yeah. Right. Now we will understand about on error, continue and on error propagate, and I can show the demo. On error, continue and on error propagate. What are these? The types of scopes. I told you two types of scopes, right? One is on error, continue kind of scope and another on error propagate kind of scope. Propagate. So what your requirement is, what your boss says, hey dupe, you need to. You know you need to develop some functionality, right? Write to a file. You got a request, write that request to a file. Afterwards, write to database and write to publish. And condition is, even if writing to the file fails, okay, some reason maybe the file is not available or some network issue, something issue file fails. You need to continue and write to database. Don't you know, write an error. Even if file operation fails, because this is you feel, the business feels this is not much. Okay, but okay, that is not much. Even if it fails, it doesn't matter. I need to go ahead and continue database operation. Usually what happens when an error occurs, it will throw us back right. What do you think, Hadoop? So can you say the last part? So I understand the error. To continue, yeah. The second one is an error propagate right. Propagate. So that means what? Propagate means if error occurs, stop the execution. Both means you can stop, but okay. Now propagate means the error will throw back to the client. Continue also, it's sent back to client. But continue retains a success response, whereas propagate retains an error response. On error continue. That means, we know the error, we can capture it, but application will continue. The request will continue. There is some exception. You said I'm confusing, I'm sorry. Yes. Oh. Whenever an error occurs in any component at the flow level, okay, for example, you're doing some error. Yeah, you got error right. You can write it to Pioneer. Okay, the Pioneer is not accessible. So it stops the execution and kill itself. It won't move forward. What happens here? It goes to the comes to the is on continuous flow. Okay, yeah. If I'm handling the file errors in continuous scope or something, it might be continuous scope or propagate scope. I can choose anything. But if I am handling in a continuous scope, what happens is all the processes inside the continuous scope will execute it and the response sent to client. But that response is success response. The 200 is here to support the success response and send back to client. Right. So even error occurs, it comes to continue block, and this continues execution and success. Response sent back to client. If I am handling the file error on error propagate scope, for example, okay, propagate scope also, the control comes over here. Whatever you define, it will execute over here, but it will throw this error object to the client. It won't send a continue. Success response. Okay. And then, when it sends back the information to the client about the error, then it will not execute anymore. It will stop. In both the cases, it stops. Only in both the cases, even on error, continue also the file after the file. It won't execute this one and this one. This both are not get executed. It lands into this scope. The scope will execute and the response is sent back to client. It will stop. Let me tell you one more thing, okay? I can show you this example. Let me try about this to another propagate error continue. What I do is, okay, some live. I'm right here. And if I show you the configuration, this is very simple. It's a configuration. I configured it. The port 881. And there is no path. There is no path. Okay, very simple. And there is some set payload. I put some payload like HTTP request operation. Something like that. And here what I'm doing is I'm doing some HTTP call. What's this typical? I'm calling abicom /abc. Actually, this is a weird one. This this URL is not exist in the world. So I will definitely get it. Right. Okay. And then okay. Then you log it. It go to this part, not the right. So let me debug this one. So I have a question. I thought you said in error handling, you cannot log it. You cannot the log. You cannot. I thought you said the error handling section. The only thing that you can go there is the on the two scripts of error handling. But looks like you have a log here. Is that just because you give me example? Two scopes, right? Okay, let me show you the scope. So what is the scope? Scope handling. So I didn't give any type over here, right? But scope. So you choose on error propagate, right? On error propagate, But inside there it has a logger. I put some logger just to log on to logger. Just to log this one. That was a direct question. Something like that. Oh, I can put anything over here. Whatever you want, okay. My understanding was that an error handling section you can only put either on propagate or on continue. Yes, on error continue. See, this is a box. But the one you know. Yeah, this box that says what? On error propagate. So inside there you can put anything. Yeah, inside there you can put the logic error handling logic. Whatever logic you want to, it says that put over here. Let the logic be set. Got. So you run, yeah. See, no control is over here. You know, there is no error actually. But the thing is, I did execute this request. I'm not saying. You can send that one. What happens? I got error now. Then you can see the red border, right? See, I got an error. Okay. So now you see. You see what the error is. Yeah. Et for peer. Error type is hatep forbidden. Right. Put. See, it is. But what? Yeah. Right. See, this is a type of it. Yeah. 4 I see tree that. And if we go inside over here, and there is a parent error type, there is some hierarchy. Actually, it should be forbidden. It's a child of HTTP client security. And it is child of Mule client security. And it is child of Mule security. And finally, Muleni. Muleni is a parent one. Muleni means it handles any kind of thing. I can show you the hierarchy. This isn't just for your knowledge purpose only. I show you. It doesn't matter. See this error type. HTTP is a namespace and forbidden is an identifier. So now, if I move forward, the control comes to on error propagate scope. See over here, it's getting a bit tight. And if I click once again, what happens is I'll get C500 server error. And HTTP request operation is not there. It's a some payload. How I got that payload is, you see the log. You put that in the log. Log won't come. Log only writes to the error record by sending request. This slide is come to log. And so log port. Here see. I got this one right. The record was sending the request. Log you open. You only see the console. Yeah. And I'll put your file. Error record. I got this response. So hold on. Hold on, yeah. Yeah. So can you go back to the flow? So the error handling. The error message in the log. So the log. Okay, if you go the log. Yeah, here, yeah. So error record was sending request. Error record was sending, that becomes what? That's error message. Right, you log in. And that's what the then postman get it back as a payload. It's only right to log file. Log files. Log files are there right first. If any error occurs, what we do? we check the log files first. So this one writes the log. And it set the error record. Right? Exactly. Okay, let me show you the log file. It is actually okay. So I go to this one. What is our application name? For the moment, our application name is Error Handling Concepts. This is application name Error Handling Concepts. Now there is a file called inside the app, Error Handling Concepts. Inside this one, to find so this is a log file. The one I write is your error occurred while sending request. You can see that. You know that is log file. And that's what you had on the log. And then is that what? What do you call that postman? Gets back as well. No. That's what I'm explaining now. How postman gets that one. See in this is the guy, right? Okay, what is this? This is talking with the postman, right? So whenever you send a request, that is first received by the listener. What listener will do? Listener will change to Mule event and the Mule event is given to set payload component. And this process will happen. At last, that Mule event is given to listener and listener again transform back to HTTP response. And that's response sent back to postman. Is that clear? Yeah. Now, who will be sending response back to postman is listener. Is sending response back to postman actually. So if I put a listener, if I click on the listener, and you can see a response section over here. I put a response section. What response I am sending? I'm sending payload as a response back to postman. You can see here. Sorry, not body. There is some response, error response actually. The error response means I'm sending payload as a response to the postman. Here I'm setting some response. What period I'm setting HTTP request operations is the period I'm setting right before. HTTP request operations, payload, HTTP request operations. This is a payload I set before getting error right. So that error will go to the client actually. But actually what way? This is a modified actually. I did modify what by default what it contains. Let me, what is that? I can show you. I can show you what response section. See response section. The error response. It contains error.description. This one. This is the same over here. But this response, the error response section. Instead of payload, I put error.description. Okay, I'm sending this error. Now I exclude that request operation. So, error.description. What is description? HTTP put on resource permitted. This is the description, right? So I'm sending this error. So what? How I am getting output is the listener, that is the response section. The response. If successful response, this payload will go back to Postman. If any error occurs, there is error response section. It is sending error.description. Means whatever error occurs, that error description is sent to Postman by default. If you want to change, I changed earlier, but by default I will show you that. Okay. Now you can see this 500 error means error is thrown back to client. Actually, got it. So now what I have to do is, I have to do this. This is a flow reference. Flow reference is referring to flow. This flow reference is referring to this flow. So what I said about the flow reference atom. If flow reference is encountered, all these three components will come and sit over here. It's over here, right? Yeah, remember that, Adam? Yeah, can you say one more time? So what happened? That's a flow to flow to. I'm referring flow to in this section, in this main flow. This has a main flow. The main flow. This one is the main flow. What I'm doing is I'm referring other flow. That name is flow to. The flow to is like this, okay. So in your first sessions, what I told is whenever we have a flow, reference right. Whatever the components inside that flow will come and execute in this place, right? Remember? So we listen. Then the information goes to the flow to, right? A flow to, that flow to is the better expression we can use. All these components will come and execute in this place. So okay, logically, this flow to, but this execution happening in the flow one only, sorry, main flow only, okay. Yeah. Now the catch is this flow has error handle and this flow has error handle. See the polyg flow. This flow We refer to flow 2 has error handle and main flow has error handle. Right. So if I configure a error handle scope like this on error propagate, so this one control handles TP. What I want to do is I want to handle any all step errors. I have a whole bunch of CP errors, right? What I want to handle any kind of ST error. I want to handle by the scope. If I give any right, what happens? Even if we test database, that is also happening to the scope, right? But what the requirement is, I want to configure this scope in such a way that it handle all step errors. Right. So, in that case, what you do configure is, you should not configure this one. You should configure this one. They need to do some expression. Oh, what you can do is error. Okay, I'll show you this one. How to configure this one to handle all step errors. First, we want to do this. Okay, that one. Multiple things. That one, I put it later. How to configure a scope to handle specific kind of error. That one, I put it later. Now focus on one thing, Adam. Right, there are two flows are there. The main flow and flow 2. Right. And the error occurring in the flow 2. Okay, so let me put a hybrid point over here. It's already running. Let me try. So now it is putting this one. Right, Adam, you are seeing. If I remove or whatever is called error and the control comes to this error handler. Okay. So now what kind of error handler it is actually? What type of error handler? Non-error propagate error? Yeah. Propagate error handler propagates the error to the calling flow, right? Main flow. So if I click over here, what happens is there is propagated over here and from here to the propagated over here. Right. And from here it's going to the line. The client. So here is subflow. Subflow is not subflow. There are two flows. The call flow. Call flow and calling flow both has the error handlers. But both has the on error propagate scope and the handlers. So error is propagated from call flow to calling flow to client. It's problem. Right. It goes back from here to here to client. For example, if I configure this error handler as an on error continue, the flow to what I'm doing is I'm configuring on error continue, not on error propagate. I'm configuring on error continue. I was going to ask you that's nice. Let's see. Let's see what it does. Yes, error comes here and here. Yeah. 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 So if I move to the next point, what happens is see the control comes to the logger. Right? So the flow reference was successfully executed even though error occurs. This continues to not return the error to the main flow. Oh, so that's what the error continue means. It moved to the next component, next one. Yeah, right. But if when it was propagate, it didn't go logger. It came to the flow back. Right. And it give back to the listener. Yeah. In the previous example I showed you. Yeah, it is propagate. Error propagated to flow reference and then error propagated to this level. Okay. Right. And this means it excludes. Success response. Even though it get error message. Even though it error means see, this has to continue. Whatever is error is propagated to the main flow. Error is not propagated to main flow. So there is no error. It is succeeded success. Logger is executed and success, yeah. But how can be 200? Because remember we were requesting a bad URL. And that bad URL is supposed to be like you cannot. It is supposed to go like 403 or 500 or whatever. Then that was bad error message. And then when it comes back to that is what the error continue did in a flow tool. And when it passes back to the logger, it is supposed to print an error message. Right. So it will be back to logger. What we are printing in this logger after a specific request. Some message I am printing over here. Second. Right? Alright. I know the log. So I print whatever you have a log. But in this time it is not reporting correctly what the error message was. Just because the reason is on error continue. On error continue. Okay, I see they could propagate. The error is popped back to the main flow. From where it is occurred. It is propagated back to the main flow. But error is not propagating from this flow to this flow because of this one. On error continue. I have a crazy question. Yes. And is there like a custom error handle in Mule? Yeah, where you code or like you write up a script. Like if this do this, if this do this. Yeah. Is that common? It's a common sense. It depends on the customer and the handle for that. For some of the errors. But most probably manage this one. Oh, is this like this error? Error. I know that error and error. The two scopes of error handling in Mule. Like you showed me. Like error handle to continue or error handle propagate. Is this the concept that MuleSoft offers? Right. Exactly. And I think that's good to know that. But I'm thinking in real world, you might see a lot of other. You may have a different way, a customer's way of doing it. Of handling this. There are certain conditions that you want to continue. The uncertain conditions that you want to propagate. I don't know, but I'm thinking out loud here, I'm thinking I'd be people like you who have done this so long. Do you? You don't depend on error. Continue on error. You might come up your own way of doing error handling. That's not common. It's very rare. We have so much customer. It's a requirement. We define some kind of error handling framework for each project. That we follow that framework. We define some framework, the customer framework, but that contains this components, on the other, propagate and other continuing components. Alright, we'll get to that one. And I'm thinking, well, thank you, that's good. This really is important subject, and I hope once we use a real projects that we will all have some better idea how to utilize this. But I understand the concept wise and the scope of error handling and how to use them. How is used? Summarize, we have error handler. Error handler is simply a box. It contains error handler. We put this box outside the flow or inside the flow. If you put inside the flow, it becomes local. If it's outside the flow, that's global. This box contains error handler scopes. Each scope is intended to handle some errors. That's right. The two kinds of scopes, that is, one is continuous scope and one is propagate scope. So propagate scope will propagate error back to client who called this scope. That's right. And a continuous scope won't send an error. This block will execute. And the output of this block execution. This may send back to client success response. So continuous scope doesn't send error back to client, whereas propagate scope sends an error back to client. Here client means that may be a flow that is referring this flow. Maybe another flow that is referring this flow, maybe a client application that is calling this flow. So whatever. When the request comes to this flow, right? So propagate will send the error back to the caller, whereas continue won't send the error back to caller. That is the main fundamental limited number. Alright. And each scope, whether it may be propagate or continue, will configure. What we configure? We configure error. Means this scope is capable to handle that error. Right. Okay. Do you have any meeting now? What is that? Do you have any meeting? Do you have anything now? No, I think I'm good. I'm good for next 15 minutes. Oh. Shout if you have anything. Sounds good. Thank you. And finally, do not forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel.